We all can get stuck. We all want to get unstuck. How do we unstick ourselves? We began today a deep, transformative perspective on life that will get us past ourselves. What we're going to be doing today is a little bit deeper. Maybe we're going to start off a little bit deeper than we normally do to actually come to what I hope will be a very practical point. But to get to that point, instead of me just giving you a brief bottom line, I wanted to share briefly, not going to go into through every detail, but share a sort of lofty concept, but I think very relevant. So we're going to teach the concept, and then we'll discuss the relevance. So this obviously ties into this week's Torah portion, as we've been trying to do lately. This week is a double portion. It's the last two portions of the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus, Vayakel, and Pekudei. And the opening verse of Vayakel, it says, Vayakel Moshe, and Moshe gathered. He gathered the people to talk to them. And that's like sort of unusual. Like we sometimes use that term, a red flag. It likes make me think like, what's going on? I know something's going on because Moshe's talking to the Jews like all the time, from the Exodus until the end of Deuteronomy, until the end of Devarim. Moshe keeps talking to the Jewish people. And he's obviously always gathering them. And we even know how. We know there was a procedure and there were two like chatzotros, tribes of trumpets that were blown, different signals for different groups. So we know he gathered them. We know how he gathered them. And suddenly now we're told, and he gathered them. So that means something significant is going on. The Torah is trying to tell us something. So what? And then, though we know that really he's going to give over the commands about building the tabernacle, the Mishkan, he starts talking briefly about Shabbos. And within Shabbos, he begins to introduce the concept of Shabbos one more time. We've heard of Shabbos before. Sheshes Yomim Te'aseh Melacha. For 6 days, work should be done. There's many other questions if we just want to analyze a lot of questions, but we don't. We're learning this to get to the bottom line that's relevant to our lives. I'm just giving enough information that we will understand the flow and we will get to the learning we need to help ourselves be better and unstuck people. So Rashi and the Zohar and the Medrash all say that the reason why the verse says Vayakel is to tell us, again, Vayakel, and he gathered, to say it was a very significant gathering. It wasn't like every day for about 40 years when Moshe is teaching the Jewish people Torah. No, this was a very special day. This was the day after Yom Kippur, meaning, just to give a little background into the history of the Jews at that time, so you can understand what I mean by the day after Yom Kippur. You think, oh yeah, that's the day we're all exhausted and drained, or the day we're starting revving up for the Sukkot holiday. Well, in the desert, it was a little different because that was like, so to speak, the first Yom Kippur ever. Backstory. The Jews leave Egypt, the Exodus. We're maybe already cleaning our houses or shopping or buying our tickets for Florida in preparation. So we got that coming up in a few weeks, the Exodus, 3 weeks. And then there's a 50-day count up to the giving of the Torah. Amazing. The 6th of Sivan. And then Moshe says, I'm going up to God. I'll be there for 40 days. I'll come back down, teach you everything. He means 40 days, complete days, night and day. And the first day obviously wasn't complete because he was going up in the middle of the day. They did not understand deliberate design to fall very strongly on their faces. And as we know, 40 days later, he doesn't come down and the Jews sin with the sin of the golden calf. And that's what happens. A sin we are still paying for till this day. And then Moshe comes down and smashes the idol, kills out the sinners, does 3 types of tests to determine who sinned what, how, where, and what their punishment should be. And then he goes back up to God for another 40 days and 40 nights to plead with God to forgive the Jewish people. He comes back down. We're not done. God still says, nope, not yet. He goes back up for a 3rd time for 40 days and 40 nights. And finally, on the last day of the 3rd set of 40 days and 40 nights, which not coincidentally was Yom Kippur, God said, I forgive. It's a 2-word phrase. We say it all the time on Yom Kippur. Salachti kidvarech. I forgive them like your words. I forgive the Jewish people. Have them build my home. Have them build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. I will dwell among them. So Moshe comes down. Now, Moshe has not been with the Jews for a long time, basically since the giving of the Torah, right? 40 days, 40 nights, punish the sinners, smash the idol, punish the sinners, go back up, go back down, go back up, plead, pray to God. God said, I forgive them. And Moshe comes back down. This is the day after Yom Kippur. He's gathering the Jews to give them the laws of how to construct God's home. God forgives us. God's going to be with us again. God's going to live on planet Earth. He's going to have a home. Like Mashiach, the tabernacle. But because this was the day after Yom Kippur, and we're very much feeling the impact of what had happened with the sin of the golden calf, before we start with those laws of the tabernacle, and we speak about how we're going to construct a tabernacle, a physical home, and God's going to be on planet Earth, we still want to do some mopping up work. We still need to cleanse the evil of the golden calf, which really goes back to the evil of the primordial sin, of the sin of the tree of knowledge, of Chet Eitz Hadas. Because in that original sin, that original sin, first day man is created, and we have that original sin, evil came into this world, a filth. It's called Kabbalistically Zuhama, which means literally a filth. An evil, a filth, death entered the world then, evil entered the world then. The world became gray. Until then it was white and black. The snake was black and everything else was white. And then we have shades of gray, and the evil gets inside of us. And we've got gray and black inside of us as well. A lot of impact from that original sin. And finally, by the giving of the Torah, death was taken away then. It was done. It was finished for 40 days. Until they sinned. We were alive then, though we were the holy, righteous women. The women didn't sin. But the men sinned, and it all came back. The filth came back. The dark came back. The gray came back. The death came back. It all came back. So now, the day after Yom Kippur, Vayakel, this is big, this is huge. This is not like we're going to do every other day. We are really focusing on, this is post Yom Kippur, we got forgiven, but we got to get rid of this filth. So before I start talking about the tabernacle and creating God's home, I want to discuss Moses is telling the Jewish people. I want to discuss how we're going to rectify what happened. We all remember it happened not so long ago. The sin of the golden calf. Yes, the sinners are gone. There were sinners that sinned with witnesses and warning, gone. Sinners that sinned with only witnesses, gone. Sinners that sinned at any level, gone. But all the Jewish people are guilty. We allowed it to happen. We didn't stop it from happening. It's our collective communal guilt. That's how we always have to look at things going on with the Jewish people. You can't say, well, she's doing it. He's doing it. I would never do that. We're all part of one organism. If something's going on in the Jewish people, it's going on with us as well. So there were a number of things Moses told the Jewish people they needed to do to rectify, to correct, to remove that filth that came back to the world. We're going to focus on one thing, that first verse. This is all based, as I said, on a Hasidic discourse of the Lubavitcher Rebbe from 1952. This might be the first time I'm ever giving over a Hasidic discourse. We don't usually do that in this class. It's sort of a deeper level, but I thought it was just so relevant, the lesson. So again, that first verse, we're talking, weirdly enough, about the laws of the Shabbos, the Sabbath, though officially we're supposed to be talking about building the tabernacle. And within the laws of the Shabbos, the first thing we say is, for 6 days you can work. Sheishes Yamim te'aseh melacha. Te'aseh melacha means work can be done. That's a sort of weird way to say it. Should be 6 days, do work, which in Hebrew would be Sheshes Yamim Ta'aseh Melacha. 6 days work, and the 7th day Sabbath. But Moshe said, 6 days work can be done, implying passively. You could do work, but the work is passive. And this connects, what does it mean by passive work? This connects to a verse from Psalms, from Tehillim, which you might know, it's sort of famous. Yagia kapecha kisocha ashrecha v'tovlach, which means the work of your hands, that is what you will be eating from. And then how fortunate are you? It will be good for you. And the sages say how fortunate, that will be your life in this world. It'll be good for you in the world to come. So whatever King David is talking about here in Psalms, the work of your hands that you should eat, whatever it is, it's really good for us. We're going to benefit in this world. We're going to benefit in the next world. This is amazing. This is great. This is wonderful. What is this? What is this work of our hands that we're going to be doing and is so amazing? Hasidic thought explains that what King David means in Psalms is Yagia Kapecha. For all these extra amazing, great, wonderful stuff, when you work during those 6 days, and God allows you to work, and God tells you to work, and God created a world that we need to work, but it should be Yagia Kapech. It should be the work of your hands. Meaning, it should not be the work of your head. It should not be the work of your heart. It should be the work of your hands. Because there's a lot of stuff we need to do in this world, and we all live in a very physical world and live very physical lives, and none of us are off the hook as far as I know. But even when we're very busy with all the things that we have to do and that life throws at us, all the extras and all the regulars, we are still supposed to strive that it's the work of my hand, that only my hands are really getting into this work, that my higher level self, my mind, my heart, my feelings, that I'm saving for God stuff. That's serving God. That's studying his Torah. That's doing his commandments. When I'm dealing with things for God, that's the real me. That's my real life. And that's when I'm really active. That's when I'm really involved. That's when I'm invested. That's when I'm passionate. And when I'm dealing with this world, just do what you have to do. Like Moses told the Jewish people, Sheshes Yamim te'aseh melacha. For 6 days, passively, work should be done, sort of like happening on its own, all the robotics going on. Don't be into it. We're at our best when we're into God. So we want to do the other mundane stuff that fills our day and nights as minimally as possible. What we need to get by, not more than that. We want to leave our best energy, our best strengths, our vitality. We want to give that to God. We want to give our energy to God. We want to give our passion to God. And the other things we just sort of do. Now, a person could say, wait a minute, this is not correct. I caught you. You made a mistake. Because King David said in Psalms and Tehillim, Yagia kapecha, which means the work. Yagia means like work, effort. The yagia, the effort of your hands. And you're saying like pecha, it's only your hands. Don't put your mind into it. Don't put your heart into it. Don't put your passion and your feeling and all that leave for God stuff. Let your hands do the rest of the world stuff that fills up all of our days and nights. But then it's not yagia. Yagia means effort. Yagia means you're working hard. So you're working hard, but you're barely working. That's an interesting combination. But it's actually both. It's yagia, it's hard work, and it's kapecha, it's your hands. You're barely working. It's hard work, and you're barely working. So the barely working, we understand. We're being told, don't invest self, just do it. But then how is it yagia? How is it hard work if I'm barely doing it? Well, the hard work part is because it's not what I want to do. I don't want to be doing this. I want to be busy with what I want, which is God, which is Torah, which is commandments, which is communal responsibilities, which is helping other people, helping Jews, helping the world. That's what I want to be busy with. Not with this physical stuff of shopping and cooking and cleaning and laundry and dishes and life and phone bills and mistakes on your bill and then calling them for an hour to deal with it. That's not what I want to be busy with. So I'm doing it passively. I'm not going to invest my heart and soul in it, but it's still yagia. It's still effort because I don't want to do it. It's not what I want to be busy with. So when you're doing what you don't want to do, that's called work. So it's yagia, it's work because I don't want to be doing this. And it's kapecha, it's the work of my hands because I'm just keeping my hands involved and myself, I'm reserving for things that are my passion, serving God. So there's 2 aspects here. It's only with your hands, not with your real self. That's the kapecha, the hand part. And you're doing what you're not into. You're doing what you don't care that much about. And that's the yagia part. And when we deal with the physical world this way, that's the rectification for the filth that's been in this world since the primordial sin of Eitz Hadas, of the tree of knowledge. And we don't yet understand why this rectifies that. I mean, if you do, I definitely didn't tell it to you yet, but it does. Aliza, whose hand has been patiently up for quite a while.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. How do we understand this in conjunction with understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be in the physical world, and he wants us to elevate all the physicality? So that's one question. And then the other is in terms of us not doing something that we care about. But here I thought when it comes to Orchos Tzadikim that we learn when we decide like what profession to go into, it should be something that we actually are interested in where we do have a chush.
Great questions. I hope I remember both in my head at the moment, but they're both really good questions. Okay, so the first question Aliza asked, and they were both really on target. I hope I will give as good answers as her questions were. The first question was, God wants this world. No, this is not Catholicism, and it's not. And God wants this world, and he wants us to live in this world, and he wants us to have physical lives in this world. And actually, every time we serve, we are elevating the world and giving the world to God, and he wants all that. So what are we saying here? That was her first question. And she's 100% right. And it actually is not a contradiction to what I'm saying. It's a very subtle balance. And as I introduce this class too, this is not usually the direction we go in this class, but I just felt this is so relevant to the stuckness, I just made up a word there, that I feel so many people have. I wanted to give it anyway, even knowing it might not be normally our mode of thought. But the point is, yes, God wants this world. He does. He wants us to live in this world. He does. We're physical people, get married, have children. Everything in Judaism seems to be related to food, either eat or don't eat, but we got lots of food stuff in our world. And at the same time, no, that's not you. You're doing it. You're giving it to God, but you are a higher caliber. You're not a regular person like the other 8 billion of us, and you happen to have a longer checklist than they do. No. And we'll discuss this later, but this is very critical to understanding this. No, even if we think we are, and a lot of us think we are, and if I took a poll now, probably all of us might say, at least at various points in our life, yes, we're just like the world, but we have different responsibilities, and we've got to do more, and we have a long list of things God wants from us. Maybe we get more blessings for it. Maybe we're closer because of it. But otherwise, we're physical. We're very physical. We're physical, but no, we're actually totally different than the world. And we are totally like incognito, strangers in a strange land, foreigners. We are in this world in disguise. If you remember the whole idea of like Yaakov, Jacob, stealing the blessings and wearing the clothing of Esav. So that's a very deep Kabbalistic concept of the Jew. Us, the Yaakov, the Jew, wearing Esav's clothing, looking like the rest of the world and fooling the world because we do the same stuff everyone else does. But we're not the world. So we do the world, but we're not the world. We give the world to God, but we're supposed to be on a completely different plane. That was the first issue. The second thing that Eliza asked is, aren't we supposed to look at what we enjoy, look at what we have a passion for, look at what we have a talent in, and use that talent for God? 100%. But again, it's a tool. So if you look at yourself and you say, wow, I love crunching numbers. I love all the details and nuances of adding up strings of figures. I think I want to work for the IRS. Beautiful. It's good that someone wants to work for the IRS and you're so talented in it and you succeed. That's wonderful. But don't define yourself that way. That's not what you are. You're a Jew. You're not someone that works for the IRS and keeps the Sabbath and can't eat everything all your coworkers can. No, you're a Jew. You're totally different. And since God created nothing in vain, if God gave you this talent, he wants you to use it to serve him. So develop this capacity, work in this capacity, use it as a tool to sanctify God's name, to bring other Jews close to God, to bring God to the world of numbers. But don't make that your life. It's just another tool to serve God. Okay.
I just want to thank you.
Sure.
You answered so clearly. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And like I said, they were great questions. Anyone else? Any other questions on this? Okay. So what I gave over and what, thanks to Elisa's question, maybe we understood a little more deeply, was this idea of how we're supposed to look at our life. Physical people in a physical world, and your life is like everyone else's life. That physical people in a physical world takes up a lot of our life. But how are we supposed to view it? Also, continuing this thought, and this is a little more subtle, it might be a little more surprising, or a lot more surprising, is this also applies to how we serve God. This is not how we usually look at things, but this also applies to how we serve God. Now, it says in Pirkei Avos, in Ethics of the Father, do not be like the servant who's serving for a reward. Let's be honest. Most of the time, when we serve God, or I don't know if we should say most of the time, often, or sometimes, how we serve God, we are that servant serving for a reward. Honestly, let's face it, that's us. What does that mean we're serving God for reward? Well, it could mean a lot of different things on a lot of different levels, depending on who you are. It could be that you know how good and sweet and wonderful it is to serve God and be close to God. You know it's the best. You know it feels the best. It's enjoyable. It's the deepest pleasure there is. It's great to serve God. It's great to study his Torah. It's great to do his commandments. And when you do all that, you are that servant serving because you want the payback. You want the reward. It feels great and you want that feeling. Or maybe you know this is the way you bring blessings to your life. There's no straighter road. This is actually the only road to create blessings in your life is serving God. So you serve God for all the blessings. And guess what? It works. You serve, you see the reward. You serve, you see the reward. You give charity, you see the money flowing in. You refine your service. You see your kids are better. You see you're healthier. You see things worked out in your life, miracles. It works. It does. It absolutely works. But then we are the servant who's serving for the reward. Now, I don't want to say if you're serving for a reward, just drop the service. Because of course, we would much rather you be serving for a reward than not serving. So if the only thing that's going to get you to serve God is knowing how God pays back everything you do, and he does, wonderful. I'm really glad you're serving, and God's really glad you're serving, and he's paying you back bountifully. As we discussed last week, he's giving you far more than you give him. He will never, ever, ever not give you far more than you give him. And it works, and it's wonderful. But there is a higher road. We don't usually talk about this higher road, but we're going to talk about it. The higher road is when that's not why you serve. You're not serving. You're not studying Torah. You're not doing the commandments. You're not praying. You're not giving charity. You're not keeping kosher. You're not being modest. You're not doing any of that for all the great ways it makes you feel, for feeling so connected to God, so good, so close. You're not doing that for all the blessings it brings you, though it does. You're doing it because it's the will of God. That's it. It's what we call Kabbalat Ol, Kabbalah's Ol. This is what God wants. That's it. Why am I doing this? Because it's his will. And there's no and. It will give you, there's no it will give me. It will give me, but that's not my focus. It feels great. That is not my focus. I'm doing this because it's the will of God. And when we're talking about this application in terms of our physical life, we spoke on two levels, like yagia and kapecha. There's the work element, and there's the just invest your hands, do it very passively, like Moshe told the Jewish people, te'aseh melecha, let the work just sort of be done, like, somehow it's going to happen without a lot of investment on your part. That's how we discuss in terms of our physical lives. Those were the two components. And those same two components exist here. Meaning, just like Moshe told the Jewish people, te'aseh, do it passively, like we got from Psalms, from Tehillim, from King David, yagia, it should feel like work, and kapecha, it should be passive, only your hands, just do it as passively as possible. Those same two elements apply here when we're talking about serving God. Now, how do we connect those two elements to serving God? Well, because, and again, this might sound very counterintuitive. This might sound like, no way, this is off, this isn't Judaism, this isn't how we serve. But actually it is. We want to do it almost passively is the wrong word. So I don't want to say passively. But we're not doing it for the pleasure we get when we serve God. And we're actually not doing it with the pleasure we have when we serve God. I'm doing it with Kabbalat Ol. I'm doing it because God said. That, again, goes back to this whole idea of effort, work, yagia. What's the yagia? I'm not doing it because I want to do it. I'm not doing it because I enjoy doing it. I'm not doing it because I like to do it. I'm doing it because it's the will of God. So it's work. It's work on me. And I'll finish this and I'll take the question. And it's te'aseh melacha. It's memela. It's passive. It's like just the hands. Because, again, when you do something because you love it, because you have joy, because you have passion. You get into it. You're doing it with energy. You're doing it with a zeal. You're doing it with a lot of vitality. You get into the space of feeling like it's you. It's because of you. When you're doing it because you love to do it, you are so invested. When you're doing it because it's the will of God, you're not doing it because of you. You're not doing it because you like it. You're not doing it because you love it. You're not doing it because of all the blessings. You're just doing it because that's what God wants. It's not because of you. It's not about you. You are not so invested. Whatever you're doing, whatever your success is, you're studying. If you have success in that, you're doing the commandments. If you suddenly are praying better, you're doing communal work. You're helping other people in the world, big communities, little communities, individuals. You're making a difference in the world. Nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. So that ownership is gone. I have no ownership here. It's not because of me. It's because of God's will. I really feel like our sages say, open for me like the eye of the needle. I'll open for you like the doors of the ulam, of the hall of the temple that were always open. Open for me the eye of the needle. It's just me doing whatever God is telling me to do. It's not me at all. I'm only doing this because it's His will. It's got nothing to do with me. So when you really know it has nothing to do with you, you know that you're not what's making this happen. God is. Any success has nothing to do with you. It's God's work. It's God's will. Why is it successful? It's God's help. So even in your service of God, I'm going to use the word passive, relatively speaking, but it doesn't have that passion and sense of me, my ownership, because it's not. No. And that's why this is happening. So that's why it's work, because I'm only doing it because He's saying. And that's why it's kapecha, teosef, passive, because you feel so strongly it's not you. It is all Him. Eliza.
So how do we reconcile that with the fact that we're supposed to serve b'simcha, which means there's an emotion attached, not to the outcome, but to doing the actual Ratzon Hashem, Yivdos Hashem b'simcha, and that we also know in Chavos Levavos, it goes through the fact that there's the aspect of the mitzvah of the action, and there's the other aspect of the mitzvah that actually I think you touched upon this maybe a month ago, of where we are within ourselves while doing the action, while doing the mitzvah. How do we reconcile that?
Oh, I think your two questions are one, or if I missed the nuance, I missed the nuance. I will apologize. But where is the joy factor? Okay, that's a great question. The joy factor is there totally, but in a different way than we were thinking before. The joy factor isn't, I love this. This is me. This is my passion. I'm so excited. I'm creating such rewards. I see my children's salvation in front of my eyes. I can't wait. I'm so excited. The joy factor is I'm doing the will of God. So there's a joy, but that joy is not the reason why I'm doing this. It's, again, like taking a vet servant. When you are serving and you know the one you are serving is so special, you feel so privileged to serve. But in the end of the day, you're a servant. And if you got your freedom, you'd walk away. But as you're serving, you feel so deeply how fortunate is your lot that this is your master. So I'm serving God, and I'm so grateful that I'm serving God. But I'm serving God because He wants me to serve. That's why I'm serving. Not the me is gone. It's not about me. It's about His will, His need, His service.
Got it. Thank you.
And any other questions? Because this is like deep stuff. And it's also a little bit counterintuitive. Any other questions? Okay. Now, we said a few minutes ago that this happened the day after Yom Kippur, right? Moses, 40 days up, 40 days down, 40 days up, down, right? This is his third set of 40 days and nights. He has finally received forgiveness for the Jewish people, but we're really not done, because that filth, that darkness, that death came back to the world. It came in by the primordial sin. It left by the giving of the Torah. For 40 days, nobody died. It was an amazing world. Came back with the sin of the golden calf. And we've been trying to mop it up ever since. That's in a sense the road to redemption. This work, this is the tikkun. Moshe is telling them what you need to do. Yes, God forgave you. He's going to stay in your midst. You're going to build a tabernacle, his home, for you, for this world, on planet Earth. It's all going to happen, but there's still the filth. There's still the filth of the primordial sin compounded with the sin of the golden calf, and we got to get rid of it. And there are, as we said, a number of things we need to do, and this is one of them very strongly. Work with this almost like passive approach. Why? Very interesting, very deep point here. What caused that original sin? What was going on there with Chava and the snake? A feeling, a taiva, a desire, a passion, a want. That was what was going on. We understand that. We relate to that. That makes perfect sense. Well, if that is the primordial sin, we need to do the opposite. If it was a passion and a burning desire and pleasure, that's what we need to uproot. And to do the opposite, I'm going to give you a little bit, pick up the veils a little bit Kabbalistically to understand something about the journey of every one of our souls. Now, we are all here. We all have been here many, many times. Of course, we've been here many times for our own personal needs, but we also have been here collectively as a generation many times. And I know, and I've said this many times, so I'm sure everyone here knows this teaching from the Arizal HaKadosh, that the generation that brings the redemption, our generation, is a reincarnation of the generation that was in Egypt. So we know we are a reincarnation of those ancestors of ours that were in Egypt, that slaved in Egypt, that exited from Egypt, that celebrated the redemption. We saw the splitting of the sea. We received the Torah. We were in that desert for 40 years. That was us in a previous lifetime, if you remember it or not. What you might not know, and I mentioned it like once or twice, almost in passing. I don't know if I ever really discussed it deeply in this forum, but that entire generation, us, the generation that now is receiving redemption, the generation that received the initial redemption from Egypt, was actually a reincarnation of a previous redemption. It says in the Kabbalah that the Jews in Egypt were a reincarnation of the generation that built the tower, what we call the Babylonian tower, Migdal Bavel, what's called in Jewish thought, Dor Haflaga, the generation that built a tower to fight God. Now, I assume you know the story from Parsha classes, from Torah tapes, but just very briefly, is the people that are descendants. This is, again, we had creation. Now, sometimes timeline gets very fuzzy in people's minds. So just to understand what's going on, we've got creation, we've got Adam, Chava, Eve, Cain, Hevel. Actually, the world sins so grievously that God floods the entire world. Another 40 days and 40 nights, this time of rain. The world was actually flooded for an entire year, a solar year, which is even longer than a lunar year. The generation was underwater for an entire year. And then, of course, we have Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and 3 daughter-in-laws emerge from the ark and start over again. And you think, oh my gosh, they got to be the most holy people in the world because, hey, they saw a whole world destroyed. They saw they're the only survivors of mankind. They saw the hand of God. What you would think, but humans are humans are humans. And a few generations later, the descendants of the survivors of the world are at it again. And this time they're actually at it in a sense worse than ever before because they're actually trying to defy God. The whole world, basically. Now, again, it wasn't every single person in the world. By the way, Abraham was already alive then. He was, I think, 52 at the time. So there were other people there, but the bulk of the world are all together in cahoots, building a tower to go up to the heavens and fight God. And God, effectively destroys their plans by creating tremendous division among them by giving each one a different language. That is when God took the one language of the world, because from the beginning of creation until then, the entire world spoke the holy tongue, Lashon HaKodesh, biblical Hebrew. Every human only spoke biblical Hebrew. That was the only language in existence. Now, when the world is fighting God, for God to destroy the plants and yet not harm them because they were in unity, and that's so precious to God. So God scattered them by dividing them into 70 different languages based on the 70 different families of man at that time. And suddenly the whole plant falls apart because no one understands each other. So there goes the tower, there goes unity of the world, and everyone goes off to their own family, to their own people, to people that understand their language, because now suddenly no one understands their language but their little family group. That was us. That was our first incarnation as a nation, as a generation. Again, personally, we might have been here before, but as a generation, that was the first time we were in this world, and we obviously messed up grievously. Do you have another question, or was your hand raised from before?
No. I have a different question now. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I have a lot of.
Oh, I appreciate
everything
the
you're saying is phenomenal.
I always feel when you have questions, probably everyone else does too, or when you say it, they're like, "Oh yeah, I was thinking that."
Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind. So if the tikkun for our building, the migdal is that of building in another capacity, why would we build to a false God instead of the tikkun being building the Mishkan or building the Beis HaMikdash?
Because building the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash, we had a tremendous joy and pleasure in. The idea is we have to uproot what you created by your passion and joy in building by giving you a situation where you're building without any passion or joy. So it was cleansing. I totally understand what you're saying. Like, what does God gain from it? It was cleansing for our souls. It was cleansing away that wrong pleasure. Let's say someone, I'm just giving this as a random example. Let's say someone used their hands inappropriately. I don't know. Let's say they were not modest and they were touching where they shouldn't have been touching. And then later, maybe to rectify that, they had a certain pain or ailment in those hands. It's like these hands were used this way. Now these hands are going to go through this. And that's going to cleanse them. So I totally hear what you're saying. But again, the point was the cleansing, not the functionality of it, the cleansing. Has anyone ever experienced that in their own life? This idea of like, sometimes God's obvious enough that we can actually see it. I did this wrong, and then it came back in my face in a different way just to cleanse that out.
Yes, 1,000,000%. I have something very, very, like, it was very, very clear. Something happened to my kid, and it was so obvious. It was like from a sin and from like my past. And I totally related it, and it was so painful. And I'm like, but you know what? At least like now I know like I'm cleansed, and like it's over. Like I can move on now. But it was so relatable, and it made so much. It couldn't be anything else. I remember the sin that I did as like a teenager, and I knew it was totally relatable.
You're very blessed, both that you saw it and that you responded in exactly like the picture perfect storybook best way. I'm going to repeat what Shira said, just because for any of us, this is exactly the response. This is like exactly the right way to view it. Thank you, God. Well, I know it's clean.
But I definitely experienced the pain that I deserved. And I felt, I felt I deserved it because it was wrong what I did. And I had to like cry through it, and I had to like ask for forgiveness. But at the same time, I'm like, thank God it like worked out okay. But there's definitely a lot of pain there to have everything totally healed. That makes sense.
It does, because it was obviously a very real thing. It does. And again, that's yes, she was right. If it's a really big thing, yeah, the tikkun, that process is going to be painful. But it's very beautiful when God opens up your eyes and you understand why this is happening. Because when we understand why something's happening, it's already easier to handle. I mean, that's what I feel in my life. I know why it's happening. I mean, maybe it's my Yitzhara, but that's how I look at the world. I can accept it. I get it. I understand. And again, I'm going back to Shira's response because that is the best response. Okay, I'm so grateful. Because honestly, the verse says, those that God loves, he rebukes. Those that are loved by God, meaning those that love God. Which means, and this might sound weird, and maybe your teachers never told you this in school, But if you mess up and you're not especially close to God, it's possible your life will continue because whatever, you're going to get it in this world. I mean, obviously, wrong actions create negativity, but you might not ever experience that clear, I know why this is happening. This is happening, obviously, as this tikkun. I get it. I see it. Because you don't deserve that. When you work on yourself and you're moving closer and closer to God, God says, okay, I'm going to take care of this for you because you deserve it. You deserve to be cleansed. It's so much better to be cleansed than not. So I'm going to do like scrubbing. It might hurt, the scrubbing, but it's really coming from love. It's because you deserve it. If you didn't deserve it, I wouldn't do it like this. So it's really a sign. Honestly, it might sound strange, but it's actually a sign that you're probably doing a lot of work on yourself. And you're probably moving closer and closer to God. And that's why now that offense of however many years ago, suddenly you go through that tikkun for. So I don't know if anyone else ever had that experience like Shira did, but I don't know, Dina, were you going to say something on those lines?
Yeah, so I wanted to say that, so from like, I don't know if I heard you right, but if someone is like not, let's say they're not religious, they could just easily, let's say, just not have that sign and not have that scrubbing, or they just don't notice it.
Hey, there's always after this life. This is only a temporal, transient piece of our existence. And this world is a world of compassion, and the next world is a world of judgment. So it's possible someone lives and dies and never gets that overt, direct consequence for what they did wrong because they don't deserve to get it here. Because when you get it here, it's a world of compassion, and it's a much lighter cleansing. And they're going to have to get it in the afterlife, and it's going to be much harsher. But because the person has worked on themselves and is closer to God and is striving for a relationship, so God says, you deserve it. I'm going to cleanse you now, because now it's a world of compassion. So a very small amount of cleansing can be as effective as what in the afterlife will be a tremendous amount. On the other hand, and that's why, as I said, the answer isn't so simplistic, wrong actions create negativity. The Torah is our guidebook for life. And the more closely we adhere to it, the more closely life works. And the more we mess up, the more there are problems. Those problems, now again, this is the subtle point. This is the differentiation. The problems are not necessarily punishments. They are the consequence. If you don't keep kosher and you don't feel very good and you feel sort of sick and your body sort of is out of whack, that doesn't mean God's punishing you at all. It means you're a Jew. Your body needs kosher food. It was very interesting. I had this neighbor, completely not religious, and she was going through a lot of like digestive and colon issues. And she told me that the only food her body could digest was if it was kosher. And she told me this like straight, like she saw. She bought food with that, the OU, the certification on it. She could digest it. If she bought the same food and it wasn't kosher, she couldn't digest it. Now, you'd think after such an overt hand of God experience, she'd become completely religious. No, she didn't actually. But for that whole time when she was going through her digestive issues, she made sure to only buy food that was kosher because her body could digest. So what does that mean? It means Torah is exactly describing our wiring. So going back to the person, like in Dina's example, someone, I don't know if you said someone's not religious or they did something wrong and they never repented or whatever, anything along those lines. Let's just say someone not religious. Not religious, they do something grievously wrong. Will there be negativity in their life because of it? Yes. That's not rectification. That's the natural consequence of a Jew not in sync with God's will. But to get the cleansing for it, the tikkun, the rectification, for that you need to walk closely toward God. And the closer you walk toward God, the more this elicits God saying, I have compassion. I want to cleanse you now. This is a world where the cleansing is much faster. You deserve it. I want to remove this barrier between the two of us. So negativity happens if you don't serve God, but not necessarily is that negativity a cleansing. The cleansing comes when you're close enough that you deserve to be cleansed. Hope that made sense, because it's a deep, complex topic that I tried to sort of simplify. Besides Shira, has anyone here ever experienced that? As clearly, again, it might not be as dramatically as Shira did. Of course, she didn't tell us the details, and we're not asking for the details. But anyone else experience that sense of like, I know why this is happening. This is happening to rectify. I feel I have experienced that several times in my life. And it's always like, it's profound. It's deep. It hurts. Like Shira said, it hurts. But it also is comforting to know I'm being cleansed. And Dina is saying she's experienced it as well. So if you ever experience it, no, it's not a bad sign. It's really a sign that you're working on yourself and you're coming close to God. And that's why God is graciously giving you rectification. Aliza?
So then I just want to clarify what if I'm understanding you correctly, when it comes to us being passive, then passive really means we're taking us, our ego, out of the equation and just being that kli, that vessel as a shaliach for the Ratzon Hashem, rather than it being us, the individual, doing. Am I
Perfect. You said it perfectly, much better than me. I was trying to think, in the Hebrew, you say memela. Memela is a very, very hard word to translate. I have never successfully translated it. So I came up with the word passive, but you're right. I knew it was a very poor translation. I love how you phrased it. You got exactly the point. I'm going to actually repeat what Aliza said because she said it perfectly. I was expressing that there are two concepts, both in our physical life and, more surprising perhaps, in our spiritual life, that we need to walk this road to really cleanse away that filth, to really be very pure in our service of God. And one aspect was yigia, that it's effort, that it's work. And we said in the physical realm, why is it work? Because I don't want to do this. I'd rather be serving God. Makes sense. Why in the spiritual realm is it work? What's the work involved if I want to be serving God? To do it not for all the good I feel, not for all the blessings I'm going to get. I'm doing it because it's God's will. That's the only reason I'm doing it. That's the work. The other half of the equation was yagia kapecha. The kapecha was memela, not being invested in it. That's probably the best translation of memela, not being invested in it, lack of inner investment. Again, in the physical arena, we understood that. You do what you do, but you don't want to be into it. You want to be into God. And it also applies in the spiritual arena. Well, how does that apply in the spiritual arena? Aren't we supposed to be invested? We need to be invested, but as Aliza beautifully expressed it, invested as a clear, pure vessel for God's energy. And that's what I was trying to express by saying, maybe I even didn't say it, a lot of times when we do things, even for God, it could become a mitri. You know, like the phrase in the Hebrew, kochi ve'otzem yadi asali es achayil hazeh. My handiwork, my power, my might created this spiritual, wonderful thing. I saved that girl's soul. I built this institution. I hosted so many people for the Shabbos. Now, you're doing wonderful things, and we're really happy you're doing wonderful things, but it's becoming a little bit of a U-trip as well. So the idea of the kapecha, of the memela, which I very poorly translated as passively, means that it's not about you. And again, that goes back to, again, in the physical arena, we understand, yeah, I'm not supposed to be invested, but in the spiritual arena, it's not about me. It's not supposed to be me. It's supposed to be God. Me means I'm full of self, even when I'm serving God. I'm full of how great I feel when I serve God, how proud I am of myself when I serve God, how much I'm accomplishing when I serve God. And you're supposed to no, do it memela. Do it because this is God's will. It's not about you, it's about him. That's what I meant when I said you're just feeling, you're opening up like that eye of the needle and God's walking the rest of the road. Well, you're working really hard with that eye of the needle, maybe. But if you understand how broad the gates are of the ulam in the temple, you understand why your work is the eye of the needle. So you're doing your little part because that's what God needs from you. That's what God wants from you. But the success, the accomplishment is nothing to do with you. Accomplishment is God. Aliza?
So now thank you. I'm really getting then the Doros of Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim, and the Dora Flaga. Because if in the Dora Flaga, it wasn't people that were mourned, but it was bricks that were mourned. And in Mitzrayim, people went into the bricks. Then either way, it's not the people as individuals. It's just about us collectively as the door. I think if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, very good. Very, very intuitive. You put it all together really, 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 really well.
Thank you.
This was wonderful, and it's really late. So what we did not get to talk about was this very powerful concept, sort of a mind-shifting concept. How does it help me? Because if you read the title of this class, it was supposed to be about getting unstuck. And how does this all have to do with getting unstuck? I don't want to rush and say it in 2 minutes because it's really a very transformative thought. So we are going to stop at this point. We gave over very briefly, this was a very brief excerpt of this discourse, and we can digest it and think about it and probably see some practical ramifications already. And God willing, next week, we will explain why we're learning this. This has to do with ourselves, with our stuck situations in life, and how we can apply these as tools to get unstuck.